All right, g'day Teacher Geeks. If you're like me, parent-teacher conferences might stress you out. So I want to talk about how I do a PT conference and I break it up into 3 distinct steps. I found this really helps my confidence. Things go really smoothly, they run on time, and I always get good parent feedback from it. So let me explain how I run PT conferences. Stick around to the end. I'll tell you a couple of embarrassing stories about my first year's teaching, and then I'll tell you why I really enjoy I enjoy parent-teacher conferences. I'll also explain how I use this in the conferences and my new Trav's Triad model. So firstly, for some context, we have 10-minute parent-teacher conferences. I don't know if this advice will apply if you don't have that particular format. What happens, we have a whole day, 9 till 3. Parents just choose a 10-minute slot right through a Google sign-up form. Then sit down across from the parent and we talk. Now, in the beginning, my first years, I found it tricky to fill in 10 minutes about an individual student without sounding like vague and broad and like I was just making stuff up. It is pretty hard to talk about one kid for 10 minutes. So the first thing I do is I explain what are we doing in the course right now. And then I found that just builds my confidence. I can make the course sound interesting and we can talk about psychology. Then I get into the specific feedback that leads in nicely to say, okay, here's based on our course, what we're studying, here's what I can tell you about your particular student. And I try to prepare some PowerPoint notes just to remind me and also just for the parents as well so they can see. Then what I also do is I use this diagram to actually explain the kids' progress. Where are they at, right? And what level are they currently working at? And what am I trying to do to help them get to the next level? And what can the parent do to support them to help them get to the next level? Here, let me explain using a screencast how I use my PowerPoint slides in the conference. So here's the slideshow I use in my parent-teacher conferences. I have it open. It's to the side of the desk. It's not too distracting, but when I want to explain it, me and the parent can both look at it, and I use it as a visual aid. And it's broken down into 3 sections, and what I like about this is it gives me some time to prepare some notes ahead of time so I can talk with more confidence about my individual students. The first part of the presentation, I simply explain to parents, this is what we're doing in the class so far. So if this is a grade 11 student, I might say, this is what we're going to do this year. I think this is really helpful because it provides context for the parent and also it just allows me to get into the flow of the conversation and I know what I'm speaking about and this becomes a very well rehearsed little 1-minute spiel. Or I've got my level 2 slides here if it's a grade 12 parent. All right, that's the first part done. That would take about 2 minutes and I can ask questions, but they never have any questions. So I get straight into the specific feedback. And here I'll say, look, this is what your son or daughter is doing well. And I try to have something very specific, okay? So it doesn't just sound generic. And I can actually give them some insights into what the student's working on in class. And I just divide it into 2 parts. This is what they're doing well, but this is what I'd like them to work on, all right? And then here are a few things, a few tips and reminders, okay? Now, here's where I get to the 3 levels of learning, and this is where I can give the parent a visual graphic illustration of the progress of their student. And all parents, myself included, we want to know where are our kids at in comparison to other kids. I mean, we want to know some sort of quantitative score, and we can dance around and beat around the bush in our parent-teacher conferences, but ultimately, I think that's fine that parents want to know that, right? I mean, what else is our benchmark? What are we measuring against? Now, I don't use this to compare the student to other students, but this intuitively gives a level of progress, right? We can go, okay, we need to get to the red. This is the deepest level. And students, parents, when I've shown this, maybe they're just being polite, but they've really seemed to respond well to it. And I can say, look, in psychology, we've got 3 levels of learning, and I want the students to get as deep as they can in the subject. They can know individual stuff, they can make connections, and they can use some critical thinking. And then I give an example for whatever unit we're working on. So my criminology unit, I'll give some feedback to the parent and say, hey, look, your student has got the green. They can remember the key details and the terms. They remember stuff. It's fantastic. Now, what I'd like to see them do is to be able to use that to answer some questions. Sometimes they can't quite formulate an argument when they're trying to explain things, or sometimes there's gaps in their analysis. And then I can say once they get there, then they can start thinking critically. Or we have those students who can do the stuff really easily, and they're our extension students. I can say, look, Brian is, he remembers things really easily. It's great, and he writes really good arguments. And now my challenge for Brian is to try to extend his thinking and to get him thinking and arguing against himself here. And then parents realize, yeah, okay, my kid needs to work on that. Or I say, hey, look, your student, son, daughter, whatever, I call them by their name. We'll say, look, they need some help working in this foundation knowledge needs some work, and I'll give them some tips on what they can do. And that's where I might get to here. So giving some advice, I'll say, look, here are some regular things that your son or daughter can do to help them improve. And my advice here can be easily targeted to whatever level the student's working at. So for example, if they're struggling, I can say, hey, look, it's really important. All the information's in the textbook. I expect them to do some reading every day, so they need to keep up with that. Right? I can say they need to keep their workbook up to date. So if they're struggling with the analysis, well, there's always a guiding question in my workbook that gets them to try to work on that analysis part. And so they should be answering that and checking it to me. And the parents know, oh, okay, there's a workbook in this class, right? And then they can ask their student if they want to be involved, check their kids' work. And then I might also say, practice preparation as well. But if it's an extension student, I can say, look, there's always an extension, and often in class we don't get a chance to go over this. So if they really want to develop their critical thinking, they should be doing this independently and bringing it to me to show their work. And so this here, again, I can just focus on whatever particular aspect of the workbook or the readings or the course that's going to help the student. Again, this is where I come back to the benefit of Trav's Triad, the idea that, are you working at just comprehending individual bits of information? Is a student able to comprehend that, but now they have to sort of put those things together in order to create cogent arguments and logical explanations? Or can they do that, and now they're having to think against that and critically review and analyze and go, well, hang on, does that always apply? Are there limitations to this? Are there exceptions to this? Or how is this relevant in the wider world? That's why I love the Triad. Not the gang, my Triad. If you've got a better name, let me know. Okay, and so you can see that's how I go through the slides. Now, it's not a death by PowerPoint. It's just a simple visual supporting illustration of what I'm trying to explain. And it looks much more like a conversation with just a laptop off to the side where I'm just pointing things out as I need to. I found that pre-preparing the notes on the PowerPoint slides really helps because it's a preparation for me to know exactly what I'm going to talk about. And then I don't feel like I'm floundering in that interview, just like trying to rummage my brain to, oh, what am I going to say about this kid? And it's less obvious than just having like the report cards and all their grading papers there. Now, an embarrassing story. My first year teaching, we had our parent-teacher conferences. This was in the evening, 5-minute slots. I had 120 students. We turn up, there was 10 teachers per classroom spread out. I turn up with armfuls of posters and essays and examples of student work. I thought, I'm going to showcase my students' work to their parents, and they're going to be so thrilled they can actually see what they've done. I still remember one of the older experienced teachers looked at me and he was quite impressed. He said, wow, you've come prepared. Like, that's brilliant. It did not take long to get into the evening where I spent like 3 minutes just trying to find each kid's work to show the parent, and then I didn't tell them what we're doing in the class. The feedback was terrible. I was sweating. I was just lost my nerve, and I look across at the older experienced teacher who was just kind of sitting back cool, just reeling off the same spiel for a couple of minutes and then give a little bit of targeted feedback and then say, okay, thank you. Right, next, please. While I've got a line out the door of teachers who are waiting to speak to me, and I just fell to bits. That's why I like this 3-step format. Here's what we're doing in class, here's some feedback for your student, here's where we're going to go next. I really think it works. So here's why I like parent-teacher conferences. I always leave in a really good mood, and it's because I teach a lot of quiet, introverted students who don't often tell me about the subject or the questions they have about psychology, or even if they enjoy the class. It's sometimes hard for me to gauge from all of my students, and it's so cool when I hear parents say, oh yeah, we talk about it at the dinner table, and they will tell me about what I've been teaching their son or daughter, and that they talk about it at dinner. It's so brilliant. And since I've changed to this kind of 3-step format of parent-teacher conferences, there's no stress. I really look forward to the day, and everything just seems to go really smoothly. So I hope you can use this to plan your own parent-teacher conferences, and I hope this is going to be helpful. All right, cheers, thanks.